Hey, tailgaters! Ross of the Pigskin Tales podcast here. Feel that summer heat? It's not just the sun, it's the thrill of upcoming college football season, stoking the coals. So get ready for the season. Dive into the history books with Homefield, the premium collegiate apparel brand from Indianapolis. Homefield crafts incredibly comfortable gear designed with iconic vintage nods over 150 colleges. A library of history right on your chest. Homefield is the Indiana Jones of collegiate apparel, uncovering hidden gems from school archives. Unique mascots, logos, and even unforgettable moments frozen in time. Visit homefieldapparel.com and shop the archives. Homefield Apparel, where comfort, nostalgia, and the spirit of college football history unite. Again, that's homefieldapparel.com.
Possibly the most underappreciated people at a football game is the grounds crew. But we want to go back in time and look at the early grounds crew and how they took care of the grass at the fields. Timothy P. Brown of Football Archaeology joined us to tell us about the early mowings of the field. That's all coming up with Tim and more in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the Gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another evening where we get to discuss some football archaeology with the founder of that website, Timothy P. Brown. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Darren, thank you. Look forward to chatting tonight, as we seem to do every week, every Tuesday. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I feel very blessed and honored to be able to talk to you every Tuesday and get this information that you share with us. Just a few months ago, you had a very interesting topic on one of your tidbits about the field maintenance of the grass that was played on. There was no artificial turfs; it was all natural grass, and we're very interested to know about how they manicured their fields.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I actually had an earlier one. I think I probably have a link to it in this particular tidbit, but about the terrible field conditions of the past, and so now we've got artificial turf, we've got prescription grass, and most fields have good drainage and watering systems, as needed. And there's just other ways. It's just the fields are so well maintained. I mean, back in the day, especially some stadiums that used to get really heavy use, if you just had one game or one weekend where it was rainy, the rest of the season, the whole central portion of the field was just mud or dirt. It just got torn up. There's no way to avoid it. And, that's one of the great benefits of artificial turf is that, the turf doesn't really, the central part of the field doesn't wear out, so between the hash marks. But back in the day, it sure did. And so, that's kind of a lost element of the game or of the experience, both as fans and then especially as players. But, so I'm always looking at old yearbooks and other, photo sources. And so, back in the day, there's certain things going on the field that you just notice, and they're just like, what the hell are they doing there? And so, they're the muddy fields that I just mentioned. And, one of the ways that they try to maintain or dry out muddy fields is they toss sawdust all over the field. And so, I've got images, Yale Field, where there's sawdust all over the field, just trying to draw it out. Or dry it out, I should say. And then they'd sometimes put hay on the field prior to the game, like if it was going to be icy, and then they'd rake it all off, so all kinds of crazy stuff. And then, once that dirt got all, once the field became dirt rather than grass, then you see in early pictures where they raked, you see all these lines in the dirt, and it's just because they raked, just to get all the clumps out and all that kind of stuff. And then when it dried, then the whole field is just dusty, So I've got a bunch of pictures of guys, just stepping on the field, running around. There's dust clouds falling. They all look like Pigpen from the Charlie Brown cartoon. But the other one that you see from time to time is long grass, which is, you don't see it as much, but there's times where it's like, I've got pictures of place kickers trying to kick off the grass, and it's like the grass is literally like 12 inches tall, and so it's like, how the heck did they maintain the grass? So then I looked into that, and it, so initially, and I have to make sure I, pronounce this correctly, but I was asking, like, how did they keep, like, football fields, baseball fields, parks, and lawns trimmed back in the day? And so the one way that they did it was with a sigh, which is, like the Grim Reaper, with that pole, like
and a sickle type.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, so they had people out there, cutting it that way. But then, by like 1830, somebody came up with a mechanical lawnmower that pretty much, looks like a real, and I mean real meaning REEL, so a real mower that's used today, but obviously very clunky looking. And then, they also had, so there were the hand push versions, and then there were the horse pulled versions of these real mowers. But from time to time, they also reverted back to more traditional methods, which was to bring in a flock of sheep, and you just put the sheep out there on your football field or your baseball field, and let them at it.
And then you may have some new obstacles to try to avoid while you're playing.
Well, and that would make the grass grow. So, yeah, and so
nothing like a good turd tackle, that's for sure.
Yeah, one of my brothers has a place out in California where, it's basically a winery where the fields were so wet, or the wine, everything was so wet because of all the rain they had. They brought in a bunch of sheep and just let the sheep go up and down between the rows and, eat back the grass. But yeah, so, I mean, so you think about that, and it was even, for sure, I've got pictures, it included a picture from like 1943 of sheep grazing in the Rose Bowl, trying to keep it back. And so even like in the 40s, especially, with gas rationing because of the war, we saw a return to sheep grazing on athletic fields just to try to keep it trimmed. But, I mean, there were, I think, New Mexico, Loyola Marymount, places like that also, I've got newspaper articles anyways, indicating, in the late 30s, early 40s, that they were trimming their grass the old fashioned way.
Hey, just to put a comment, the images that you have, and we have links to it in the show notes here, folks, and on Pigskin Dispatch from the accompanying article for Tim's images. The image of the sheep on the Rose Bowl field, I think they got the black sheep of every family in that photo, because I think there's like two that look like they might be lighter color. All the rest are very dark color sheep. So a lot of black sheeps in that family.
Well, there was, it may have been the breed, because there was the article mentioned the specific breed, which I don't know one. I don't know my sheep breeds. I apologize. But so it may be that was just a function of.
Well, lucky for you, we just want your football knowledge. We don't need your agricultural knowledge. So.
I'm not real good on the agricultural side.
Now, the that same image, the herdsman or the farmer that's caring for these sheep, he must be a pretty popular guy, because it looks like he has like a 5-gallon bucket of I'm assuming water for these dozen or so sheep to all drink out of. So I'm sure they very popular guy with the water bucket.
So I mean, the other thing, he could have had some grain in there, and then by tossing grain into different areas, it would attract the sheep to mow the whole field.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So I mean, again, I'm guessing this only because I saw a YouTube video of some guy in like New Zealand who created a picture of a heart in his field, let the sheep in. He spread grain in the shape of a heart, let the sheep out, and they all went, and then the sheep formed a heart.
So quite an art form to get your sheep to manicure your lawn.
That's
quite
right.
Well. So, all right. Well, hey, I'm glad. Even more so this week when I have to cut the grass at the modern conveniences we have today. I'm not out there with a bucket throwing grain on my grass with a herd of sheep. So, although we do like
those were the days. Those were the days.
All right. I had a little much harder in many ways. So we appreciate those pioneers of early football taking care of the yards that we played in and getting us to advance to what we are today. And Tim, you have some very interesting, fascinating pieces of football that even go beyond the game and equipment like this, caring for the field, which is, you have to have a field to play on. So it's, it has to be that. And I know one point I was going to bring up too is a really interesting study I saw just came out within the last week or so from the National Football League on injuries compared on natural grass fields that are played in the league versus the artificial fields. And there was a higher injury rate, this study showed, in 2022 season, where people on artificial fields were injured more often, or more injuries occurred than they did on the grass fields. And I don't know if you saw that, but it's kind of interesting going back to old school, possibly.
Yeah. I didn't see that. And, I mean, it obviously when artificial turf first came out, it gripped so well that, guys just blew out their knees all the time on that. And it was like playing on concrete. I mean, I mostly played on natural grass, but I played on one or two artificial turf fields that were fairly early in the development. and it was, it was horrible. But anyways, I mean, actually, I'm a little bit surprised by that result, just because, my sense is that the artificial surfaces have come so far. But, there's a certain amount of, there's kind of no going back on some of it. If you're in a dome stadium, you're going to play on artificial turf, right? And then it's one thing to be on turf. It just takes a lot of money from an ongoing maintenance standpoint to have a really well done natural turf. So if you're the Packers or something like that, okay, you can afford it. A lot of other places, it's just, so I mean, anyone in the NFL can afford to do it if that's the right thing, right?
Yeah, I know at Acrisure Stadium, the old Heinz Field in Pittsburgh, they replaced the turf, I think, 2 or 3 times during the season, during the NFL season. Of course, the Pitt Panthers are playing on that. They have high school games, usually Thanksgiving weekend. They have 4 championship games, or 5 or 6 now. I think they have levels playing on that field. So it gets tore up that time of year, and they replace it within a couple of days before the NFL game. And that's why you see so many famous games played at Pittsburgh Stadium where chunks of the field are coming up, or they had a rainy Monday night game in Miami 20 some years ago where the punter kicked the ball and it came down point first and stuck right in the middle of the field. Yeah. And something like that.
That actually it raises a point. I don't know if the study was able to control for that, but how long was the turf installed at the time an injury occurred? Because turf that's been in there for months is different than turf that was installed last Monday. Right. So
yeah, I think they just took an aggregate of the 17 games, or I guess 8.5 games on average on each field, and looked around to see how many injuries happened at that field by the opponents. Both teams playing on it. So I think that's how they did the study on it. And it's got some you can sling some arrows at it and shoot some holes in it, but it's an interesting study, and one I know the NFL takes seriously in player safety, as they do with most items. So anxious to see where that leads us to.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Tim, your tidbits are, bringing up items like this constantly, every single day, sometimes a couple times a day. Why don't you share with the listeners how they too can share in on all the fun of hearing these?
Yeah. So, best way is just to go to my website, footballarchaeology.com, subscribe. And that by doing that, you'll get an email every night at like 7:00. I may actually push that a little bit later, but anyways, you'll get an email that with the story for that evening. And if you don't want the emails, then just you can follow me on Twitter.
Yeah. So great subject. We've really enjoyed having you share your knowledge with us, Tim, and appreciate you. And we will talk to you again next week.
Very good, sir. Look forward to it.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.